good evening. Tonight, I will tell you a long, gentle bedtime story inspired by the lives and scenes inside the cases you shared. Settle in and make yourself comfortable. Imagine a slow, steady fire, a soft chair, and the hush that comes when the house leans into night. Let your breathing find the quiet rhythm of a calm evening. This tale will carry you along tranquil lanes, behind shaded windows, down familiar steps, and into the gentle unfolding of memory and meaning. It will be immersive, descriptive, and slow-paced. A soft, steady journey meant to soothe and settle you for sleep. In the hush of a late winter afternoon, when snow lay in pale drifts and the world outside smelled of coal and wood smoke, there was a room on Baker Street whose windows held the glow of gas and the slow motion of curtains in an evening wind. In that room sat two men, quiet and companionable in their habit of thinking, talking sometimes, listening often. One was a doctor, steady-handed, calm, with the small, bright manner of someone who had walked many roads and tended many wounds. The other was lean and intense, with a mind like a finely tuned tool, always turning over a thought or reaching for some small clue that others missed. If we sit beside them now, we can watch their faces, learn their rhythms, and follow a day that begins in the ordinary and drifts into the gentle but unusual patterns of human lives meeting change. The doctor was home after time away. His coat lay folded, the smell of the outside clinging faintly to his collar. He stretched, took a sip of hot tea, and let the slow warmth of it smooth the day from his chest. The other, his friend, leaned back in a chair by the window and watched the sky. There was a stillness about him that suggested he lived inside observation, quietly waiting for the next small shift in events to catch his attention. This evening, as soft snow whispered past the panes, and the lamps beyond came on like little islands in the falling dusk, a note arrived, a slender bit of paper that carried the crisp promise of something needing care. On it was a few words: "A lady seeks counsel." When, this very night, the doctor and his companion read it twice, their hands moving in the gentle gestures of long acquaintance. They lifted their brows and exchanged the small smile of two people who have known the world's small strangenesses and learned to welcome them. For them, a quiet life was never purely simple. The ordinary could become curious with but a single invitation. And so they waited for the bell, the sound in the corridor that tells of another person seeking conversation in the late hour. The bell sang softly. The door opened, and a woman came into the lamplit room. She was wrapped in a heavy coat. The night had left its little ice flowers on her hat. She looked both tired and determined, the kind of exhaustion that sits beside someone who has carried a weight for a while and is finally ready to place it down. She moved forward with caution and then relief as she saw friendly eyes and familiar faces. Her voice, when she spoke, was warm but thin with long-worn worry. She had come from far enough to have found a thread of hope. "There are people who listen well and helpfully," she said. She had been told she would find such a listener here. She asked to be heard, to be guided, and to have something of a burden eased. She gave her name, a clear, plain name like a small town. She told a story that was not loud or dramatic, but gentle at its center, and that unfolded in small, steady pieces. There had been a house far from the city, she said, an old house full of rooms and the long patience of quiet things. And in that house, she had found work as a companion to an elderly gentleman. He was a man who preferred the quiet of books and cherished routine, and she came to tend the rooms, to light the lamps, and to keep company at the soft hours of the day. The house was green in summer and a settled white in winter. Gardens lay around it. Old trees kept careful guard. A small river ran, slow as an old thought. In the rooms there were antiques, and the smell of polished wood. There were places to sit and be listened to. There were polite faces that came and went with the soft clink of teacups. Yet something a little odd lived there as well. The lady who hired our visitor, a quiet woman with small, careful gestures, had a way of asking for small, particular things. She liked the mornings to be arranged in a certain color. She asked, gently, that clothing be chosen by her friend, not for convenience, but for the palette of a room. She wanted gentle sunlight to fall a certain way, and she liked music low and shaped around her. If a head of hair fell in a different fashion, she would note it, and the house would rearrange itself as if to answer a need only she could feel. There was nothing cruel in this, rather. It was like the preference of a person for a certain tea. Yet the woman's request that the guest change her long hair into a short style for the mornings was a little harder to accept. The visitor, who had always worn her hair long, found it an odd, intimate thing to be asked. She hesitated. The man of the house was warm and handsomely mannered, he said, laughing softly. It's only a part of life here, a small part of the price for comfort. The lady's tone was almost pleading. It would be so right for our needs. It would make everything fit. Because money was a consideration in her life then, and a kind of companionship is a rare, valuable thing, she agreed. She agreed because the world had not yet taught her caution about small concessions. She agreed because the man and his wife were gentle in their own ways. She agreed because something inside her hoped for steadiness. When she cut her hair, it felt like closing a chapter, a small sacrifice, but a final one. She waited then. She was asked to sit in the large front room near the tall windows, which looked out upon the avenue. She would sit, the house would arrange itself, and at odd moments, a figure would stand across the road in the dim light, waiting. He was a bearded man who watched politely across the lane, and sometimes he raised his hand as if to speak, but then lowered it and waited. She would try to laugh. The house wanted it, the man wanted it, and sometimes she could not. Her laughter sounded to her hollow afterward, and a new unease began to grow like cold wind through a keyhole. The house had another oddity, a locked suite that was never used and whose heavy door wore a band of padlock and cord. It had been sealed, the visitor learned, for reasons no one would explain. It was a place of a kind of hush. The visitor's curiosity drew her close. She asked, very quietly, why such a part of the house should be closed away. The man of the house smiled at the notion of private hobbies and imagined darkness and an old study. "It's where I shape my quiet thoughts," he said in an offhand voice, and perhaps meant nothing more than that. Yet, there were small things that added up to a feeling. A quiet that pressed like a hand, a room that had once been a child S, and a shadow behind a window. On a night when the moon was clear and the yard silvered, the visitor watched from her room and saw a great dog move across the lawn like a carved statue come to life, slow, immense, an animal of old vigilance. It made her shiver. "The dog is a sentinel," the house said, "but it is also an instrument for keeping something safe in the night." Then the visitor discovered something most puzzling. One evening, she was pressing her hand to her face to suppress a laugh when she held a small piece of mirror to her eye and saw behind her a figure, a man standing across the road, watching toward her window. Mrs. of the house closed the curtains immediately and asked, with a sharp, small finality, that the guest please tell her how long she had been there. The guest told only the truth. Only a second. She had seen him for a second. Still, the pause of the man across the way felt like an invitation and a test. She began then to notice other things. One evening, the drawer of a nearby chest that had been locked opened by itself, and inside she found a coil of hair just like her own. She had kept her long hair in a trunk, so the appearance of the coil baffled her. She wondered, gently alarmed, whether someone had been in her room. When she asked, the household answered lightly. "Oh, drafts do these things," they said. Still, the coil remained a mystery. Small maid who worked in the kitchen moved about like a shadow, friendly in a blunt way, yet with a secretive air. The groom who cared for the yard spoke few words and went farther than was necessary each evening into the back where the trees met the lane. The house was shaped like a puzzle, rooms that fit together invisibly, a skylight that let in light from the roof above the locked wing, and a barred lattice that kept a sense of a place sealed and kept. Over time, the visitor's unease grew into a quiet plan. She was brave and clever. One night when the groom had drunk too much and his steps sounded slow on the stairs, she slipped into the locked corridor and with small hands that trembled, pried a bit at the boards under the door. She cast about for a way to see. There was a thin seam of light beneath the heavy door, and when she put her mirror up, she could catch a small sliver of motion, a hand, a line of a coat, a movement like breath. It was there and gone. It made the guest's heart beat in her throat. No alarm came yet, and she turned away, having done what curiosity could offer. She would not sleep for a while after that. When the next small hour rolled along, she heard the click of steps at the top of the stairs. In the dim light, she saw the man of the house standing in his nightshirt, handling the heavy case, not a trunk like those of ordinary men, but something heavy, edged in leather. He bent, and there was a rude sound of twisting metal. He shaped his hands to a small child's case, and then, with frankly frightening businesslike care, placed it near the window. The guest watched, white as the glass. Then, as if by some strange signal, the man crossed the pane and handed it to someone waiting in the lane a shadowy figure who had kept his place across the way. There came the softest scuffle, a breathless step, a slight tangle, and then the sudden realization that something impossible had been staged, a swap of identity through the night. In the morning, the house would right itself. A child would be fed. No one would ever know. But one thing remained, a coil of hair that could not be explained. The visitor took courage and decided that she must leave a note, a single line, as you might drop a pebble in a lake to make a ring of truth. She walked to the small post and wrote, asking only for a person who would listen, a person who knew that small things matter. She would go into town the next day and make an appointment, but the note went out nevertheless. A week passed. The house was quiet, and yet in the visitor's dreams, there were small images that refused to mend. The big dog's silhouette, the bearded man S waiting in the road, the cord on a door that saw no one, and yet kept a presence behind it. She thought of leaving, yet could not quite go. For there is also a strange affection for a place where one has had to stand with bare feet in the cold. The sense that one might be needed to hold some slant of safety for an invisible person. This is how small, ordinary loyalty grows into a bridge between strangers. The doctor and his friend heard the tale, and like a calm current, understood. They made a plan to arrive in the quiet house before the night, to stand outside the window, to watch the lane and the places where figures leaned, and to wait for the exact moment when curtains lift and secrets move like a hush under the floorboards. They rode out at dusk. The country leaned around them like a locked book, and the lane was silver. When they reached the house, the trees shivered, and the big dog below the windows stirred as if at the scent of strangers. The plan followed the thin lines of courage. The maid was persuaded to go out and was sent to the cellar on some pretext. Then they moved. They let themselves into the room behind the locked door and watched the skylight. And there, like the sudden flash of a moth, a ladder reached up, and a light, low voice, betraying both fear and relief, said a single word that made the hush gasp. Help. The person they found on the pallet was not the tall daughter who had gone to the sea a long while ago. She was shy and thin, shocked and pitiful, her hair cut away in a rough way, her face nearly hallowed by exhaustion. The hands that tended her were not cruel as much as they were tired and clumsy. A woman's attitude bent over to soothe seemed almost kind at first. The unlocking of the door revealed the truth. She had been hidden, not abused, kept, yes, but also protected in a way that had run away into a strange half-life. The explanation, when it came, was not a bright or theatrical one. Rather, it was like a small, sad trick of love and fear. The family's heart was tangled. The man who had watched in the lane was a loyal friend who had kept the house at a distance. The groom and woman servants had been pressed into strange participation, partly through fear, and partly because they had accepted a story of madness and misfortune. The child was a lonely spirit who had learned cruelty because nobody had taught him better. The coil of hair, you will recall, had been found in a drawer far from where anyone expected it. Why? Because someone had taken what comfort there was from the room. Someone who loved the child and the house, and had thought to lay aside a piece of hair to remember the woman they were trying to shelter. To the two men of Baker Street, to the doctor, and to his companion with the lens and patient mind, the house was neither wholly wrong nor wholly right. It had walls that were full of long years of small secrets, a father's clumsy kindness, a woman's tired watchfulness, a child's roughness, and a stranger's attempt to protect a soul that had been lost to the world in its day. Over the course of the night, the situation unknotted in a quiet manner. The hidden woman was removed to a place where she could be cared for and restored slowly. The child was taught a more generous way of being, and the servants were reminded that kindness is stronger than fear. The people who came to the house left it quieter than they found it, though the traces of this soft drama remained in its corners for some time. As the road home called to them in the dark, the doctor said, in his low, steady way, that he felt glad to have been there. The other man, whose mind was always attentive to the smallest sign, tucked his pipe under his lip and pressed the corner of the hair with the careful hand of someone who reads tiny marks like a map. He spoke in soft words about a little phrase his patient had used long before at Baker Street, that the detail is the beginning of the whole, and said that tonight, in the hush, they had moved from details to a life. The countryside fell away behind them. Snow lay like a pressed sheet, and within the city, on a quiet street, the room where they returned held its familiar small lamps, and the soft, steady rhythm of a life lived in gentle watchfulness. The story we have followed is a small one in the sweep of history, but so are all the best things that fold us into sleep. The modest acts of care, the small brave choices in the middle of a difficult night, the quiet courage of one person for another. They are the things that ease the world as your eyes grow heavy and your breath finds the slow cadence that knows no hurry. Imagine the quiet house with its copper beeches. Imagine the soft figure who kept watch in such a place. And imagine the two quiet friends returning along a lane to a room warmed by the evening lamp. Let the scenes ease through your mind like river light, slow and sure, washing the edges of the day until all that is left is the gentle hush and the sense of safety at your center. Feel how small acts of watchfulness can change the course of one night. A note, a mirror held in a handkerchief, a ladder lowered under the silver moon. Then let them dissolve into the steady sleep that waits for you, like a kindly friend at the edge of your thoughts. Breathe in calmly and slowly now. The details of the world, the rooms, the people, the dog, the lane, the hush, will keep their place like stones on a path. You can leave them as they are and rest in the warmth of this quiet story. There will be other tales in the long nights yet to come, each one a soft lantern to hold, each one a little lesson in patience and insight. For now, let your breathing steady like a slow metronome. Let your muscles ease. Let your mind drift across the country lanes, past the trimmed hedgerows, beneath the copper branches. You have walked through a house of secrets and come out with gentleness for the lost. Sleep now with that kind thought. When you wake, the small things will be waiting, and their quiet worth will feel larger than before. Rest easy. Good night.